Welcome back to Construction Conversations. We have the pleasure today of kind of welcoming back Chris. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Yourself?
Oh, not too bad. And we also
Thanks for
have
having
a
me.
new guest. Yeah, you're welcome, Mr. Tim Smith. How you doing, Tim?
Hi, good morning.
So we're gonna have a conversation around kind of coaching and mentorship and leadership, which I think we're really excited about. Because one, I think there's maybe not enough conversation about that in the industry, and we'll talk about how Tim and Chris are doing that in what I think is a really intentional, kind of unique way. But maybe just to give a little background, I think some of our audience already knows Chris from a previous episode. But General Superintendent at Ellis Don, Tim Smith, you spent 30 years at Ellis Don, which is just a lot of time. Very
Yeah.
impressive. Ultimately serving as Executive Vice President, and is now you're kind of giving back to the industry through coaching and leadership development. So. Maybe before we dig into the conversation that we ultimately want to get to, I think it would be good as a foundation to kind of understand, Tim, from your perspective, what was your early experience with mentorship? I think I've heard from another podcast that you were thrown into some leadership roles early in your career. What was it like in maybe the early phase of your career, and kind of were you mentored, or what was your experience with it?
Uh, you know what? I would say through no one's fault. I don't, I bet the construction industry is not unique in this regard. Is that like teaching and developing talent is, and was, I mean, there's a lot more focus on it now, but was not really a thing. It
Mhm.
was more intentional that you were really good at this job. So I'll bet you'll be good at the next job. And really probably what it meant was you were really good at learning the last job, so you'll figure out this job. And I believe that wasn't there was no malicious intent. Obviously, that was the way the world kind of worked. And you'd watch people and you'd emulate what you liked and model it to yourself. Definitely a difficult way to do things, and probably why a lot of people weren't successful. It wasn't the fact that they weren't capable, but the challenging part of teaching yourself and keeping your self confidence going while you're making your way in and around a peer group that or a group that you may be managing that may not have the confidence in you, right? So, anyways, I think now what's happened is a lot more focus on that kind of development of talent and development of
Mhm.
leadership. And I feel like people too now understand the benefit of that. But where I think the gap is, and I'll get to mentorship and coaching in a second, is that like when you become quite skilled at something or you have a lot of experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a teacher. And a lot of us in this industry, and I'll pick on men because I actually believe in my anecdotal sample sizing, women are better at it. But
Mhm.
men are, I think that the learner, a male learner, is less likely to concede, I don't know what you're talking about, and ask a question and let their guard down to learn. And the teacher
Mhm.
is, I don't know, like maybe, and I know because I started to reflect on this as I got older, that like am I really teaching people? Like, what's the point? I'm going to leave one day and just take all this with me. What was the
Mhm.
point? And so working on that on both sides, right? Being a student, you have to be courageous. You have to ask questions. You have to give up your your safeguard, your persona that says, "Hey, I might not know everything." And then as a teacher, you've got to be, I don't know what the word is, I guess, like open, like create that safe space for people to approach you and be there. So that's that part of it. And then on a mentoring piece, like I think mentoring is kind of what I talk about, but that's a more experienced person trying to help a less experienced person grow into different roles from both a commercial technical learning and should also be leadership, and really like giving them examples, like a real, like, this is how you do it kind of instruction, versus coaching is more of a, let's see what we can bring out, let's see what we can draw out of you, let's see if we can bring more potential out of you. You have it in you. Let me just clear the fog and let me help you get to a destination where you're going to eventually get, but maybe we could accelerate that. So you're not like it's not instructional. It's not to say, hey, Chris, you should do this with this contract, and this is how you should talk to this person. Like when we interact, like in a coaching mentor or coaching coachee relationship, maybe we do that sometimes. He'll say, like, okay, not beating around the bush. Like, what would you do? But generally speaking, like, and again, I did not know that until like probably, I don't know, like 5, 6 years ago. I took a coaching course, and it was very awakening to say, yeah, don't tell people what to do because that's not how they learn. So, anyways,
Right.
that was a long answer to a short question.
No, I mean, there's a lot there, and it's interesting because obviously you've developed a very maybe layered and multi-angled kind of perspective on leadership and mentoring.
Yeah.
Is from my own perspective, I developed some perspective on leadership through seeing it in action, but also seeing a lot of poor leadership in action. Was that your experience as well, or did you come to have you just kind of osmosis gain some of this?
Uh, Interesting you say that. Yeah, I did experience what I would have thought in my young career. I didn't know it was poor leadership. It's just like people I didn't like that happened to be ahead of me in the chain of command. Uh, but I also, really, I I love sports. I played sports, and I always watched teams and was really curious as to why certain teams could win. When you look at their lineup or their team components, and you go, they're not actually good statistically as those other teams.
Mhm.
So how are they winning? And then I got curious about that, read some books, talked to different people, listened to conversations, and then this terminology culture came up a lot, very much, always. Like, so really distill that down. What is that? How do people feel when they're engaged with that group of individuals? And if they feel good, then they produce great results, right? And almost that simple. And that's kind of what the strategy I would use in terms of whether I was at work or coaching little league sports. Yeah. Oh
You
yeah, I
know,
use the word
and
culture. Yeah,
you
sports
use the
culture.
word culture, but it was, you picking up on like just watching sports and how does this team with less talent win versus
Mhm.
this team that's stacked and they're dysfunctional. They got egos. No one's rowing the boat at the same time.
Yeah,
And it's like a train. You're watching a slow train wreck, especially on a construction project, right? You're like, oh, this isn't going to
yeah,
go well. But
yeah.
so I do think like, was that was that your own like personal curiosity? Was that a sort of an Ellis Don initiative? And how did you sort of take that curiosity? I heard little league, right? Or coaching kids sports almost. I thought I heard that,
Yeah,
sort of that
yeah.
psychology around coaching in sports. And then how did that, how did you like in the early days sort of transition that over to your day job?
I think it was probably a lot less intentional than I think it might be,
100%.
or it
Yeah.
looked to me now. It's just kind of like, I was a bit ahead on my responsibility versus my age and experience. So I was like working, I felt like I was working harder, or maybe not working harder, it's not the right term, but I was probably more anxious about the outcome than I would have been if I was a little more seasoned. So I was very dependent of the people around me. And you got to remember, like, if I roll back the clock, like I'm senior to you guys by a number of years. And so in the 80s, 90s, there were a lot of veteran builders in the business. And in particular, subcontractor, foreman, and superintendent, and things like that. So you had like technical understanding. Also, I don't think buildings were as complex then, but you had the technical knowledge was just there in spades. Like you never had to go look for somebody who was an expert. Like they were just everywhere. And there were any problem, there was some dude who'd done it, and you didn't really have to figure that out. And I quickly, maybe I'm a bit lazy that way, but like I'm not gonna do something that somebody else has done. and I would rather kind of rally and coordinate the troops. And, like I also enjoyed the challenge of winning personalities over. Like, I would show up, like I was the superintendent, like Chris, and I was young, and my wife and I only had one car, so I had to ride my bike to work. So they were like, so immediately there's this like, what? There's a boy coming on his bicycle.
There's a boy on his bicycle.
I had hair and everything, so I looked a little young. So it was like I had to work through that, and I was
I mean,
encouraging.
and that's such the opposite of like I think so much of maybe the culture at times of like the machismo kind of approach to
Yeah,
project management or field leadership is like huge truck
yeah,
lifted,
yeah,
loud, like yeah, right. But like
Presence,
you
right?
show up
Yeah.
with a bike.
Big
I
presence.
love that.
Yeah.
It's like everybody was saying, "Can you afford a car?" Well, actually, we have one car.
Just because I can, yeah, we already have a car. What are you talking about? I
Like,
got a
what do I
bike,
need?
man.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I got it. I had like a rockin' cool Rocky Mountain custom built mountain bike.
You will not
It was a good
believe my
bike.
bike.
It was a solid
No
bike.
one cared. No one cared except for me. But anyways,
Yeah.
so you sort of like I was doing that to myself, right? And then a little bit of it was the more the bravado was pushing back on and not that I was like a wimpy kid or anything like that. I was pretty fit. I'm a decent sized human, and I love quick witted conversations and stuff like that. So I'd play along with it, and it kind of helped to build a relationship with these senior. They're having to be all men.
So much of it though, I think comes down to your personality type and how
Yeah.
you approach
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
difficult situations
Yeah.
and or tense situations. And for the listeners, Tim was talking earlier on about, a hack on if you're walking into a tense meeting, you just bring in some chocolate chip cookies, before the meeting, right? But that mindset that's obviously carried you through, and it's, I think, atypical in construction where ego, machismo, the tough guy, the big, it's no, hey, and you come in with a smile, you deflate the situation, and it's like, let's go build some epic stuff together.
Yeah.
How can I be the
Yeah.
best teammate? Very rarely does
Yeah.
anyone ever talk about like how to be an
Yeah.
incredible teammate
yeah.
rather
That's-
than
that's-
I just want
that-
to I just want to control it,
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well, I think like it's that's a great way to put it. Like a good teammate. Like Chris and I talk about that quite a bit, right? Like what's your
Yeah.
job ultimately? Like in terms of your stratospheric, like what's your beacon? Like what are you chasing? Like what's the purpose? I guess.
Well, I go back to, Chris, our previous conversation we had is like, it was like somehow at 6 o'clock in the morning, I can get 400 adult men to listen to me to accomplish some sort of coordinated goal or, multiple tasks every single day.
Yeah.
And I think there's many different ways that a human being could approach that task every morning at 6 a.m. to listen to someone. And clearly your approach is resonating with those 400 people on like, I want to follow that guy. I got to get this mission done.
Yeah, but I think, Lars, to add to that, the whole part of that is not, it's a team atmosphere. So people will listen when they're part of the conversation. But if it's going to be a dictatorship, I think you're going to fail, right? And that's I think the goal of what we're trying to achieve on a day-to-day basis. I can't do this by myself. I need everybody here to help. And we're all a part of a team, and we all have a responsibility, and we need to get from point A to point B. There's going to be some rough roads ahead. But at the end of the day, we want to walk out of here doing high fives, and we want to remember what we accomplished.
100%. And celebrate it, right? Like it's fun to win. You gamify it, right? Yeah.
Yes. Losing sucks.
Losing
Well,
sucks.
Yeah.
And that kind of culture piece is, I think, what kind of brought us to this conversation was Chris. I think, in our original episode, I think you did a great job of speaking to the need to really think tactically and intentionally about project culture, and then, more broadly about leadership development of the people on your team and how that makes them feel part of the team. and then, talking about your journey of kind of working with Tim. So maybe it might make sense to maybe make the connection here. So, Chris, you're Superintendent Ellis Don. Tim, you're maybe a business operations lead. Probably getting your title wrong at this point, but there's a lot of different maybe angles to your journey. But um, how do you guys maybe come together within maybe the structure or category of mentorship? Who wants to maybe tell that story?
What are you, Chris?
Sure. So I think I've known Tim for a long time, mostly because of his position at Ellis Don, but I've didn't really know him. I just kind of knew more of who he was. And I think Tim and I, and maybe Tim, you have a different story, but we've crossed paths a few times, but nothing really like, hey, how's it going? Like nothing, just no real concrete conversations. And then I was starting the project that I'm on now, and Tim's name came up in a conversation, and long story short, I thought I would maybe reach out to Tim to see if he was interested in coaching me. And that's kind of how it came together.
Yeah, pretty simple. And you know what, like I've been coaching a few people at Ellis Don, and I don't like, I say this to Chris all the time, like, I'm not going to call you, you call me. Cause like, I don't want to force this on you kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
and you always give me feedback. Cause I'm not, there's no kind of, I'm not perfect at this. I'm learning too. Yeah. So it was pretty cool. Like when he called me, and I quite thrilled actually. It's kind of a compliment for somebody to reach out to you and say, "Hey, I'd like to work with you and see if I could help grow my leadership and my career." And I take that as quite an honor. So yeah,
And was that something that you had thought about because you're retired from Ellis Don officially, right? Maybe on the
yeah,
operations side. And was
yeah.
that something maybe intentionally you thought about how you would want to maybe give back to the industry, or did it kind of just happen? What was the kind of process?
Uh, Probably my last years, I was winding down. Was a few conversations with people assuming the leadership roles, and we were talking about, maybe you should get into coaching. You could be our coach, our mentor, and do a lot of that. And I was like, I was interested. I was like, it was quite an honor that you know, they weren't waiting for me to leave the parking lot or anything quickly. So I was nice.
walking you out of the
Yeah,
building.
sorry. Can't wait till the door hits them in the ass.
Yeah.
Oh, don't forget
If
to
I could
leave your
just add,
yeah.
sorry, if I
Right.
could just add one thing, and I kind of want to make it clear at the beginning, I didn't understand the difference between a mentorship and a coach. And I was kind of going down the path that it's the same thing. So Tim, when I reached out to Tim, there was a quick kind of divide on what the outcome would be, and it wasn't about mentorship. And then and it turned into more coaching, which is I thought I was doing both at the same time, but there's a divide in there between coaching and mentorship, and then all of a sudden you get maybe 2 sessions in with Tim, and you start to realize, you know what, I've been mentored more than I know, or more than I realized, going back 20 years. And that's where, so the big kind of the moment for me, or aha moment for me, was there's a difference between being coached and having a mentorship. And when we first started, I thought it was the same thing.
And Chris, what for the listeners? What do you, in your words, what's that difference?
So the mentorship is the day to day, and I don't think you ever really realize you're being mentored until that space has passed. So when you start to look back, you realize that you were being mentored all along. It could be from a coworker, it could be from a senior, it could be from anyone, right? It could be even your family, right? But you don't realize it until the time has passed. Whereas I think coaching, and there's different types of, I think there's different types of coaching. So the coaching that I receive from Tim is very safe space, conversations about whatever we want, whether it's personal, whether it's work, whether it's we talk sports, right? And it's just that safe space of anything at any given time, that you can call. But the mentorship to me is happening every day. You just don't always realize you're being mentored, or there's a something happening behind the scenes, basically.
Appreciate you sharing that. And I liked, Tim, when you said sort of like the coach's job is to accelerate the potential that, that's already within you, right? And harness it quicker, harvest it, pull it out,
Yeah.
and mature it. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because mentorship is sort of like just sort of keeping you on track, right? Just
Yeah. Yeah.
on pace. Here you go, guide rails. But then there's this coach. It's just like, all right, where do you want to get to? All right, let's navigate that path.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
let me ask you tough questions that are, in business, it's sort of like, do I work in the business or do I work on the business? And I think mentoring is, I guess you could say maybe in it.
Yeah.
Coaching is on it. And in this case, it's on the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the question about like, how did I get into it? So it fits into what Chris is saying. So at the end of my career, I was a little bit nervous about doing that because I felt like, well, I'm not really qualified. I know how to
Yeah,
do
like who
stuff.
am I?
I know how
I'm
to
just
do
a guy.
stuff. I know how to do
I know.
stuff. So
Yeah.
I ended up I took a coaching. I think it was a few months. I want to say like 6 months, a couple times a week, online courses, this coaching program. And it was kind of like what Chris was saying about the difference between coaching and mentoring. It was really awakening. And what I thought I would be doing and what this program was teaching me to do was kind of terrifying. Like it really took me outside my comfort zone. And, you were doing all these simulated coaching interviews with people who are also doing the program who you'd never met. And it was online. And yeah, I must say, it was tough. I was stressed out.
Would you
Did you
learn
agree
through
with it?
that?
What's
Oh,
that?
good.
I guess did you agree with its approach, were you able, or are you able to kind of like formulate your own approach, and that was kind of an input into maybe that thought process?
Yeah, you know what, in hindsight, I probably was more pushing back to protect myself than
Yeah.
like, it wasn't the fact that I disagreed with the program. It was the fact that it was scaring me. So I needed to say, well, you're wrong and I'm still right. That kind of
Yeah.
self-defense thing. But after I got over that, and then there's a coaching accreditation, certification you can get where you're pure coaching. And I felt like I didn't know if that was where I wanted to go. I wanted to kind of learn how to have good conversations and be a better listener and not tell people what to do. But sometimes, like Chris will say, yeah, I actually I want your advice. And so I would say I probably have morphed it into something that I feel not totally comfortable with, and hopefully is functional for the recipient. Like, so I have kind of hybrid styled it.
Well, I want to go back to something I heard you say earlier, which was when you were younger in the field, you're surrounded by experts, and it's like, but this wheel's already been created 47 times before me with everyone here. I'm just going to go find the guy that's sort of done this, solved this exact problem, right? And I think, if I'm putting myself in Chris' shoes, and I certainly don't want to speak for Chris, but it's like sometimes there's just like, Tim, I know you've been through this before. Can you just tell me what you did, please? Please. And that doesn't take away from like the coaching. It accelerates this, like, this problem's already been solved how many times before? This is how I solved it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And but I'm okay if that comes from him. I just don't want to be that. I don't want to be that, the old guy who's got all the experience. This is how we do it. And like, cause the old days are just that. The old days. They're not good old days. They're just old days.
I was part of an organization, like a EO, YPO, and they actually, very similarly to the coaching sort of methodology, it was never you need to go do this. And what it was they called it Gestalt, and it's like well, I ran into a similar experience and this is how I solved it. Right. And so you
Yeah.
share your
Yeah.
own personal experience rather than saying, Chris, you need to go do this.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think, Chris, maybe that's probably what you're getting at.
Yeah, but for me, it's not. If it's only let's call Tim if I'm really, really stuck. And I don't mean that in a degrading way, but I've been around long enough to know that some things work themselves out, right? And I'm
100%.
not going to call Tim every time the duck doesn't fit in the corner or something like that, right? Like it's generally the conversations that I get good feedback from Tim are generally personality based or something along those lines. Like the technical part of it, I don't think Tim's going to answer, and I don't think Tim wants to answer the questions of how to put the building together. That's my job. Like, and if I'm calling him to ask him how to put the building together, then that's a problem, right?
You're in
Right.
trouble then, because I don't even know.
Exactly. So it's
Like, I don't know.
No one's calling me.
yeah, right. It's changed so
No
much.
one's calling me.
Yeah. So it's they're very specific for me anyways. They're very specific times where I feel like I'm at a roadblock, and it's probably something that Tim's had to deal with before at a very high level of looking after a lot of people and dealing with a lot of different personalities. Right.
So what I'm hearing you say is a lot of the coaching is more or less leadership and personality related, team related, team dynamics. Is that correct?
Probably. I mean, not every conversation is about that, but yes, there's a lot of those are the ones that trigger me to say maybe I should just call Tim.
Maybe I need to call Tim.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you look at like you mentioned all the experience that you had around you, Tim, and experience is a giant umbrella that includes technical knowledge. It includes how to navigate personalities, how to interact with maybe municipalities, right? And so I think having access to someone who has that breadth of experience, it doesn't even matter if you're not talking about technical. There's a way to interact with all those different dynamics in
Right.
a collective manner. So I think that's really powerful. I guess maybe to ask you, Chris, by having this kind of access to coaching, has it also influenced how you maybe coach and mentor those on your team?
Yeah, for sure. There's always something that I take out of the conversation that I'll use. Might not be
Yeah.
right away. It might revert back to it a year from now or something like that. But a lot of the stuff and a lot of the conversations can spark something to try and get over the hump. And the other thing with Tim is Tim's been in the industry long enough. He almost knows everybody, right? So if I'm having a conflict with somebody, he probably knows them and has probably gotten over that hill with that person or that
Right.
company or somebody in that
Yeah.
company and knows how that operation works, right? That's the key is like if I that's the key part of having Tim as my coach because he understands how it all works. I've had other coaches, and it's not to demean other coaching programs, but they don't necessarily understand the world that we're in all day long, whereas Tim does, and that's where I get the good feedback or the proper feedback on how to potentially deal with something, right? And even if we have the conversation and we don't need to, like maybe Tim doesn't have an answer or he gives me an answer and I just don't think it's going to work, but it still gets the wheels turning, right? It's a break or it's a reset of that issue, and it starts to get you to think a little bit clearer. But it's at the same time, it's a safe place to be able to lay it all on the line. And if I need to curse and swear, Tim will listen, right? Do you know what I mean? Where if other coaches, they might say, Chris, we need to hang up now because you're too much.
We've never heard those words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
I love
Um,
it. Like, let's get into it.
Yeah, it gets the juices flowing. It gets everything, kind of hopefully on the right direction. But, it's one of
Maybe
those.
a group question. How rare do we think this is? Like this structure of creating a forum where someone can be coached by someone with domain-based experience. Like from my perspective, I came from Whiting Turner. I've worked in a few different roles in the industry, been around for 15, 16 years. I haven't seen that. I've seen informal kind of structures, which is, there's benefits there as well. Do you guys are seeing this outside of maybe the Ellis Don kind of world?
I don't know of anybody. To be
Yeah.
honest,
Lars,
I don't know, maybe
do you
Tim, you
know?
do, but
Um, so I had a coach, and I was in sort of a coaching program for many years. And Chris, I actually want to ask you a question about like what was that spark for you? You know, what was missing, right? That caused that. But, we had a monthly coaching program whereby it was almost like a 360 feedback. But it was more or less like, you know, think org charts and structures, but it was like, hey, listen, I need this from you. You need this from me. Let's just be transparent and let's see if over the next like 4 weeks, we can align more around what you need from me and what I need from you. Right. But that's just like, again, how to be a really kick-ass, I think,
Yeah,
teammate.
like executive
But
coaching, right? Like I've had that, but like
Yeah.
project deliver, like domain-based mentorship and coaching, I think is pretty rare.
I think the challenge is how many Tims out there exist.
so yeah. So let me retract a little bit. Like I know people that are being coached through coaching programs. Like Stephen, you said, like executive coaches or corporate programs. I know those, but I don't know of anybody that is being coached by someone that they, you know, in the same or was in the same corporation and knows the industry. Like the coaches that I've been through, and Lars, maybe I'm going to answer your question here, but what I found with some of the other coaching programs, they were really good. Um, but I found it didn't become as truthful as a conversation because I kept trying to use terms that they potentially would understand instead of the terms I would use with Tim.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? So you were always stepping around,
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
get to the point instead of my phone call with Tim. Like I mean, my phone calls with Tim are usually about an hour long, but we could probably solve all the world's problems in 20 minutes because it's boom, 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 and it's, do you know what I mean? And then the rest is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
shit. Do you know what I mean?
I 100% know what you mean. It's that deep domain experience
Yep.
with a guy who had no ego in the 80s who drove to the job site on a bicycle,
No,
right?
no money,
No
Lars.
money.
I
No
had a
money. Okay.
massive
Okay.
ego. I just couldn't afford a car.
I thought you said massive head of hair. What was that? What was that? Um,
No bike
and
helmets in the 80s.
yeah, no, by cones. Um, but in my experience, it becomes more painful and more stressful around trying to explain someone schedule problems
Yeah.
and some of those like coordination
Yeah.
issues that you're having, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm stuck. Who can I?
Yeah.
And yeah. And so
And
it's
the
like, no.
conversation starts with like, my P6 schedule says I'm supposed to do that. And then that other person says, what's a P6? And you're like,
Wow, where do I don't even know
yeah,
how to continue the conversation.
right.
And so,
Right.
but what's interesting, it's almost as if, and this is, but again, I think the Tims of the world, and Chris, you've been at Ellis Don a long time, but you know, 30 years at a single company. Stephen, what are the metrics around, we'll call it our generation, bounce around companies here, right? It's
Yeah.
people move. So how are companies arguably not just building great employees, but like investing in them to become coaches for the next generation within their organization? And I think, Tim, that just happened organically, or maybe, I don't want to say by mistake. It just sort of just naturally occurred based on your personality type, your curiosities, and your desire to just like be a really good human being, right? And share experience. But like that to me is this, if there's a movement around that, now all of a sudden, I think a lot of great things can transfer and things can elevate. Stephen, I don't know if you have, I thought you might want to say something there.
No, I mean, I think this is providing ideally the industry a template. I mean, we talk about a lot about the labor gap. We increasingly talk about the brain drain that's happening. I mean, I think Tim, you could, be a poster child of what this current generation of kind of recent retirees could do for the industry. And I think there's a lot of benefits there. And so I think that's kind of what I want to highlight here is you did a lot in your career, you learned a lot, but you also want to stay engaged and stay
Yeah.
engaged in a way that offers value back to people who want to learn, right? And there's that two-way street kind of element to it
Mhm.
where Chris, you're reaching out and there's
Yeah.
humility in reaching out and saying, hey, I do need help. But Tim, I guess what would your message be to, the 65-year-old field super who is potentially retiring in the next couple of years, but maybe wants to stay engaged? Like how from your perspective, has it been rewarding? And I guess what's your experience been?
I think it is rewarding. And actually, Chris and I were talking about this the other day. I said to him, like when I retired, the biggest takeaway for me was I was overwhelmed with feedback from people that, just said they enjoyed the journey with me and
Mm.
appreciated and it was about the people. I know that sounds, well, maybe it doesn't sound corny. I'm actually getting a little emotional when I say that, but I still think it's about, like, to me, the most fulfilling thing you can do is to have a relationship with somebody where you support them and you just help them find their way that they were probably going to find themselves, but you're a small part of that. And just that, it's just, I don't know, it's just ultimately rewarding. And also, yeah, you want to be engaged. Like retiring, it sounds really good. Like I do play a ton of golf, and I still ride my bike, fellas. And but it's not,
Same bike.
it's not, it's a different bike, yeah. Uh, and
E-bike now,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no,
E-bike.
Chris, not yet.
Uh,
Uh, anyways, but still, wanting to be engaged, still wanting to relate with people, so that kind of fits. And I had the benefit of a coach for a number of years as well. So I did learn from my coach, Mike, and yeah, so I wanted to do that. I'm not as assertive with it as maybe I
Stephen, we
should be
starting
lost him.
in terms of
in and out.
dragging people into it. Oh, am I cutting out? Okay, how's that?
Yeah, we can kind of hear you now. Yep.
I think you're back now.
Okay, all right.
But I mean,
I think you guys are.
yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you
You
guys.
were on
Okay.
a good little tear
Yeah.
there, man. That was
Yeah.
a good one.
Maybe I'm gonna switch to my iPad. Maybe that'll be. Hang on.
Maybe.
Uh,
And we can hear right now. But I think I like what you said. I mean, you're kind of
okay.
summarizing, what this has maybe provided you. I know we've got 5 minutes left. I think
Yeah.
while we have connectivity, Tim, I think it would be interesting if you could kind of, yeah, give that message to maybe your generation or the generation after you of why they should invest in this way, maybe how. Like if you're
Yeah.
about to retire, you're a general superintendent, and you like it, even if there isn't a formal program, I think just offering yourself up, but
Yeah.
like maybe some advice to that generation.
Yeah. 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 I think that I think first of all, if you're interested in that, I think like a lot of people, maybe at that time of your career, you're tired. You may think that you don't have a lot to give and a lot to offer. I think that, yeah, you're tired, but the fulfillment and the fun of the business is probably the engagement with people. And that's probably what you'll miss the most. But I also think it's not going to be like you're not, you spend so much of your time if you're a field superintendent or that type of personality, you're really driving things, you're pushing, it's hard work and you're trying to get things done and it's not always in, always aligned with the people you're trying to get to do things. So you're going to remove a lot part and you're not going to be telling people what to do. You're going to be listening. So if you are going to do this, you're going to have to change you're not going to be an instructor. You're going to be 80% listener and you're going to like say, hey, that's okay. And you're going to have to look up what the definition of safe space is. You're going to have to learn and you're going to have to recreate yourself and you will be outside your comfort zone. And if you're willing to do that, the reward is people are going to respect you. They're going to trust you. They're going to confide in you and it's going to feel good. And,
Hmm.
you know, and then it kind of turns on you. And then all those years I spent doing all this stuff, I can actually give it back. And if you have that kind of Like if you have that void of dealing with people, I think you should explore it. But yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable for a bit, but you'll
Yeah.
reinvent yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe to flip the question back or to you, Chris, what would be your kind of message to anyone in the field right now who maybe feels like they want to coach or feel like they could use one? Yeah, what's your message to them?
First of all, it's not easy. For me, it was potentially an awkward situation. Like before I reached out to Tim, I thought about it hard. Like it was one of those, I don't know, like I don't even know if Tim even knows who I am, right? Like, so I'm gonna maybe call him and he's gonna say, "Who's this?" And I want to be your coach, or well, you'd be my coach, right? Like it's just so once you get over that and then you start getting through it, it's a great place or a great system to have. Uh, Um, I recommend it to anybody. At some point, I'm not sure. Like, I don't think you need a coach your first day on the job when you get out of school, because I think you'll get mentored for a
Hmm.
long time. It's when you start getting into the senior leadership positions where it really helps. Like I don't think I would have benefited, and I don't think Tim would answer the phone if I'd have called him 10 years ago and said, "Hey, it's Chris. I want you to be my coach." And he'd say, "Well, I got better things to do, Chris." And then, right. So I think there's a timing aspect to it. But I'm hoping that the perfect situation is you are being coached by your leadership every day, and you're being mentored by your leadership every day. And then when you get to a certain position and you're not sure who to call, then you have that safe space with somebody like Tim or a coach, right? That's what, for me, that's the benefit of it. But yeah, it is getting over a hump. Like
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's not
fantastic.
it's not an easy, just all of a sudden you walk in one morning and you'd be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna call Tim right off the hop."
Well, and I think it picks up another key theme that we've talked on a number of episodes about, which is humility, right? We talked about the intellectual curiosity being
Yeah,
a key component,
curiosity.
but also
Yeah.
humility is
Yeah.
maybe a byproduct to that. But
Yeah.
we're out of time. I really enjoyed this. Lars, any final comments before we go?
Thank you both. Tim, I'm sort of reminded in like the first 2 minutes, we sort of talked about like how the industry is sort of known to just, wow, you were kind of good at this job. Okay, quick, we need you over here. And they just throw you. And it was a sink or swim, right? It's trial by fire, right? That's what this industry is all about. Rarely do we ever have time to actually like coach. But I think to your point, we now know what winning teams look like, right? And we know how those winning teams are built, and it is through great coaching, great leadership. And I think this just sort of hits the tip of the iceberg around, you know, how you've operated as a leader, and Chris, how you've operated as a leader, and how that torch is being passed now, whether it's through Ellis Don, but also other companies, right? And what that opportunity is. And again, I appreciate drawing sort of the distinction between mentoring, say, versus coaching. And I also appreciate this like whole idea around, maybe just because you were thrown into the fire doesn't mean you have to throw someone else into it, right?
Yeah.
And and guess what? It's going to be nice to sleep in for a week when you retire, but then you're going to be really bored. Like you're going to miss the hunt, the chase, that pulse that we get so accustomed to, and having a way to not be the accountable or responsible individual, but like be the phone the friend guy, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm here to
Yeah.
I'm here to be your pressure relief valve. I'm here to help you, coach you.
Yeah.
You've got the torch now. You're carrying the burden, and but that doesn't mean you need to do it alone, right? Which again, Stephen, we've talked about mental health and some other things. So yeah. Anyway, it's so Tim, congrats on a great career, and also probably being more on the non-typical, atypical construction executive, dare I say, and making yourself available, not having a big ego,
Yeah.
and just helping. So, and Chris, what a blessing it is to have a guy like Tim in your life, and a company that honestly that supports and it's building this sort of stuff. So pretty cool, guys.
Yeah,
Pretty
we're
cool.
lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, one final note, like we all talked about how fragmented the industry is, and I think it is on everyone in the industry to tear down those silos wherever they exist,
Bingo.
right?
We own
Whether
that.
it's within a team or within a project or within a company. And I think by getting coached and coaching, you can start to become less fragmented, build networks. I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
important. That's kind of my takeaway from this. So yeah,
Yeah.
Tim, Chris, thanks. Appreciate you guys coming on.